You might have read some books or watched some videos, but the only true way to learn to survive is to experience it firsthand. From getting through one of the most unbelievable diseases out there, to people who've lived for years by themselves in unbelievable conditions. Here are people who survived the impossible.
Hey guys, this is American Eye, bringing you another great video.
Number 12. Stranded in Arizona. A 72-year-old woman was stranded in eastern Arizona forest in the White Mountains in 2016 for a crazy total of 9 days. While driving to her grandkids' house in Phoenix, her hybrid car ran out of gas and electric power, leaving her in the middle of the isolated Arizona terrain. Ann Rogers had stored some food in her car, but ran out not too long after. She then had to kick into survival mode. She was lucky to find a nearby pond and had to resort to eating desert plants. A search began not too long after she was supposed to arrive at her grandkids' house. If it wasn't for this help sign she made out of sticks and rocks, she may have never been found. Her and her dog made it out okay, but the old woman needed medical assistance. Number 11. Lost in Khao Yai. A male and female were lost in Thailand Khao Yai Forest in 2016. The couple from Poland were lost for 2 days with no supplies. Although this may not seem like a long time, Thailand is home to quite a few deadly creatures and is extremely wooded, making this a tough place to come out alive. Time was certainly of the essence. The search involved over 100 rangers and needed a helicopter. The two were forestry scientists, but they didn't keep track too well of where they were going. The male tourist suffered a neck injury, as you can see from this photo. It wasn't clear whether or not the injury was serious. They were extremely lucky they were found because the area of the forest they were exploring was forbidden to the public. Number 10. Yamamoto Tanuka. A 7-year-old Japanese boy was found in the bear-infested woods after being abandoned by his parents. He managed to survive 6 days near Mount Komakatake. His parents apparently made him get out of the car as a punishment for misbehaving in a desolate wooded area. They claimed to have came back within a few minutes to get him, and they were just trying to teach him a lesson, but the boy was already gone. He wandered about 3 miles through the forest during this 6-day period. Luckily, he found a base where he could sleep. The conditions, however, were not ideal by a long shot. He reportedly slept between 2 mattresses and took drinking water from a tap outside the camp. He was discovered by police at this abandoned place, and he claimed to be extremely hungry, and he scarfed down a large amount of rice and bread. The parents will most likely be facing neglect charges against them. Number 9. Lost in New Zealand. A mother and daughter from North Carolina were lost while hiking down the summit of the Kappa Kappa Nui Track in the Tararua Forest in New Zealand. Carolyn Lloyd, age 47, and her daughter Rachel, 22, planned on the hike to last them only 1 day, but it ended up being 4 days instead. Despite the beautiful scenery, this turned out to be the hike from hell. Carolyn thought her daughter was dying after she hit her head on a rock. They managed to survive freezing temperatures in the New Zealand wilderness, and how they were found almost seems like something straight out of the movies. In this photo, we see the help sign they made from sticks and stones. Luckily for them, a helicopter noticed this and went down to save them. Number 8. Julianne Koepke. In 1971, Julianne was 17 years old when she boarded a plane on Christmas Eve with her parents on a trip to Lima, Peru. They wanted to join their father for Christmas, who was working in the city of Pucallpa. During the flight, the airplane was struck by lightning and it began to disintegrate in midair at 10,000 feet. Miraculously, somehow, she survived the epic fall while attached to her seat. This was possibly due to the trees cushioning her fall. She suffered a broken collarbone and a gash on her arm. Her wounds became infected with maggots, and she tried her best to avoid deadly critters like piranhas, crocodiles, and a steady supply of insects. Finally, she was discovered by Peruvian lumberjacks and lived to tell about it. Number 7. The 1972 Andes disaster. Uruguayan Flight 571 makes a list for the atrocities that occurred afterwards. This flight was carrying 45 people, including an entire rugby team. 25% of that crash didn't make it. The ones who did survive had very few resources to live off of. With starvation staring at them directly in the face, drastic measures were needed to survive. After the few chocolate bars that were stored on the plane were eaten, the survivors made a decision that they would eat a few of the less fortunate who didn't survive the crash. Cannibalism was their only option to stay alive, since it was difficult finding any animal in the high altitude of the Andes Mountains. 72 days later, they were rescued and lived to see another day. Number 6. Real-life castaway. Tom Neal, the author of the book An Island to Oneself, survived an astonishing 16 years on a tiny island on the Cook Islands. He planned on visiting the island, but couldn't have imagined staying there that long. He was dropped off with 2 cats, a water tank, and some books. The only thing on this island left by man seemed to be remnants of World War II. There were also wild pigs and chickens that he could eat. During his stay on this island, he planted a garden, domesticated the chickens, and repaired the boat. However, in 1954, he severely injured his back and needed to be taken off the island desperately. Luckily, he was found by a couple on a yacht. Number 5. Mark Inglis and Phil Duell. Imagine being high up in the mountains when suddenly a massive snow blizzard covers the mountain where you're hiking. How could you survive this? Mark Inglis experienced a similar event while hiking through New Zealand's Mount Hood. They built an ice cave and hoped the storm would soon stop. Living on meager rations of whatever was in their backpack, they barely had enough food to stay alive. They both lost circulation to their lower legs, which would then have to be lost to amputation because of frostbite. Mark Inglis and his buddy Phil Duell became the first double amputee to climb Mount Everest in 2006, and they made the most of their lives, which they almost lost getting stuck in New Zealand. Number 4. Ebola survivor. Nancy Ripoll was working in Africa when an Ebola outbreak was taking place. Being very dedicated to her job, she worked quite closely to her patients, maybe a little bit too close. The average fatality rate of Ebola is 50%, but it's known to fluctuate to 90% in recent outbreaks. It's been hard to contain due to the fact that it's spread from a large variety of animals, most animals being found in tropical forests. The disease attacks your internal organs, causing them to bleed profusely, and is typically fatal only after a few days after contracting. Somehow, Nancy, an American citizen working as a missionary, was able to survive. Nancy had also contracted the most deadly of the Ebola viruses, known as Zaire Ebola. She was beginning to feel the horrible symptoms, and it was clear that she needed to be transported to a hospital in the US if she had any chance of living. She was transported on a special plane specifically designed to quarantine her. She received blood transfusions and a ZMapp, which some believe led to her recovery. This type of treatment isn't typically available in Africa, so her flight to the US might have been what saved her. Number 3. Aron Ralston. This photo from the movie 127 Hours with James Franco depicts one of the craziest hiking incidents. Aron Ralston was going down a slot canyon when a boulder fell and crashed on his right hand, leaving him immobile. This took place in Wayne County, Utah, just south of Horseshoe Canyon. Since he didn't tell anyone about his hiking plans, he was left alone, and no one knew where to find him. After eating all of his remaining food and drinking what little water he had left, he decided that he needed to do something drastic. Each time he attempted to remove the stone, he failed, and only had one choice. He took this selfie right after the boulder fell on his arm, before having to make the unthinkable next decision. After 127 hours, he reached for a dull pocket knife and decided to cut his own arm off at the mid-forearm. He was found about 6 hours after the amputation and will make it to see another day. Be careful when you're rock climbing by yourself out there. Number 2. Ada Blackjack. This woman we see here is from the Inuit tribe, and she lived as a castaway in unimaginable conditions. She joined a group of explorers in the northwestern areas of Siberia, but it turned out they were not prepared to handle the extreme conditions. The men who were on the voyage suffered from scurvy and left behind Ada. Odds were certainly against Blackjack, but she knew how to set up traps and managed to survive from the meat of birds, foxes. She was finally rescued after 2 years of surviving on her own by a man who was hired by the group of explorers she left with. It's quite remarkable that she was able to make it 2 years in Siberia without completely freezing. And number 1, the real-life Croc Dundee. Imagine trying to survive 70 months in the Australian outback. Mark Clifford was apparently taken to the Australian outback by some criminals who wanted to beat him up. It's believed he had some ties with illegal Australian gangs, but who knows? He claims it was a hitchhiker who did this to him, but police weren't buying the story due to his past. He spent more than 2 months eating lizards, frogs, and snakes after the mysterious encounter happened with him. Mark often came across hungry dingoes and drank water from a nearby dam. He lost more than half his body weight during the whole ordeal, meaning 115 pounds. The Outback is one of the most inhospitable places in the world, and it's certainly hard to spend just one night here, let alone 70 nights. He was eventually found here by authorities in an emaciated condition and went directly to a hospital in order to recover.